we're back. The podcast is back. It's time for 100% truthfulness and honesty. All right. How often do you check your bank account?
Oof, I would say like once a month.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
probably more than me. Okay. I am so bad at checking my bank account. Like when they send me that email with like, here's your bank statement, I'm like, great, delete. I don't,
Immediate delete.
I'm not interested. And my wife is so different. She is like, if there's a bookkeeper in the house, it's my wife. She's like, what was this $5 Venmo thing for? And I'm like, oh, it was for eggs, like at the farmer's market. Like, me and the guy decided we didn't want the government involved. We're just going to do this under the table, a little Venmo action, send him the little egg emoji, and I got my dozen, and I'm gone. I'm
There you
done,
go.
right?
You're good.
But I mean, there are so many businesses that also struggle with their financials and checking in on them and their bank statements because they're so focused on their jobs, their trades. You're the best at X, Y, and Z, but maybe financials are way in the back, right?
Totally. And
You're just about selling.
as long as the payroll is getting paid, every 2 weeks, as a lot of the owners that we speak with, payroll gets paid, materials provider gets paid. At the end of the day, they're like, okay, that's all I really need to be worried about from a financial standpoint.
Yeah. So, I mean, so to help this along, to help our listeners and, anyone who is, just listening in, we have Ruth King on the show this week. We're going to be speaking with her about all things financials when it comes to your business, because I mean, there are so many businesses that falter in their first year and their first 5 years, not just home improvement businesses, but all small businesses struggle with this.
Totally.
So
And she's
yeah, so
actually known, I believe, as a profitability master. So we couldn't have anyone more qualified to be speaking to our contractors about it. Through business ventures, Ruth really helps small business owners reach their financial goals. And that's through training, goal setting, and providing them with the resources and coaching that they need when they really have a lot of pain within their business.
yeah. So today we're going to be talking about the importance of pricing, process, and profit with Ruth. If you want to learn more about Ruth, you can check out her website, ruthkinghvac.com. We'll put it in the description. And we hope you enjoy the conversation and you get a lot out of it, because Sarah and I are now financial experts. So,
Fantastic. Enjoy our conversation with Ruth.
hey, Ruth, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. I think we've worked on webinars together before, but I don't think we've actually had you on the podcast. So I'm very excited for our conversation today and sharing that with our listeners. I guess we should get ourselves started here. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what type of coaching you give to small businesses?
My focus is on operations and financials. So I look at my role as giving your listeners the tools and processes to get and stay profitable, build wealth, and hopefully give back. Because giving back is always a really important part of, once you make it, and it feels really, really good to give back. And you don't only have to give back to charitable organizations, you can give back to your employees. I mean, by sharing a piece of the net profit every year, as long as it's put together and everybody knows what it is. And in good years, you share a lot. And in bad years, you don't share a lot.
But what kind of what kind of services or coaching do you offer small businesses? You have, I think it's called Business Ventures, right? Which is like your coaching.
Mhm.
But like, what do you offer? And like, I guess, what are some things that you think that like contractors could do a little better and you can help them with?
All right. Number one is pricing. And I have a pricing manual and a pricing template online that you can do at your leisure to figure out how to price properly and do it. So that's really step one, more so than anything else. So that's online. The other online thing is maintenance, because building recurring revenue programs is absolutely critical for longevity, building cash flow, trust. At some point when you sell your company, it's worth more. So online, I have the pricing template, I've got the maintenance templates, and I have a course called How Do You Make Your Financial Statements Fun and Sexy, which is always so much fun to do. It's like an eye-opening experience, and it's self-paced and you can do it at your leisure. There's homework after session one, you turn it in, we look at it, make sure it's right. So do session two and go all the way through it. So I have online classes books and manuals and things along those lines that are, the processes and procedures written down, dispatch, field management, operations, whatever. And so I do those things that are online, or you can just do those at your leisure. I teach classes that are in person. I do a class called Building Profit and Wealth, which is 2 days, 1 day on balance sheets, 1 day on P&Ls. I do individual coaching where we set up the goals and objectives, and I help you implement them. And that's a very select group because I work with only non-competing contractors, so that sometimes like the contractors in the group get to say no, and that's okay.
I think one of the cool things about when I was reading about you was that you started the online teaching thing like really early compared to other people. Like you were in the game,
Yeah.
I think it was like late '90s, early 2000s.
Late 90s, we were doing things with ISDN lines and things like that. So we had different companies that in ISDN lines had to be installed and everything from that perspective. And then we moved it from there all the way on to, we were the first ones really to put video on cell phones. I mean, it's just crazy what we started doing. When everybody says you can't do that, we were doing it.
I think one of the fascinating things about it, I think, from your perspective, and I would love to hear this, is you teach all of these contractors and these home improvement business professionals, but like, what is one thing that I guess prevents them from seeing success from like taking something that they learn and implementing it? I think that's like, you can pay for trainings and you can pay for all the resources, but like I think there's just like that it's that taking that step. Like, what do you think holds people back from taking what they learn and implementing it?
They're not in enough pain. And when they get in pain, they start paying attention. I can't tell you how many business owners have said, "Where were you 25 years ago?" Well, you weren't ready. Until you are ready, you will not take the steps to implement. You can go to every training course in the world that you want. You can buy every manual in the world that you want, and it will sit on your shelf, so you won't do anything and you will have wasted your time. When you are ready, and sometimes it's, you run out of cash, or you have a situation where your best employee leaves, or a customer drops you, something of a magnitude actually happens to you. And then you start paying attention. Do I have my pricing right? Am I taking care of my employees correctly? Am I sharing the wealth? I mean, there's so many things that come at that point. But until you are ready, or until you're in enough pain to make the change, then nothing's going to happen. There are very, very few people who are, I'd say they're the 20%ers who are, literally motivated to, okay, let's do this. And they're just motivated that way. They're not motivated by fear. They're not motivated by pain. Most people are, and they're sitting there in happy, dumb and happy land. I don't know any other way to describe it. And they can complain all they want, but until they're ready to do something about it, they're going to continue doing the same thing. I think, I don't know who said it, but somebody said the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting something different. And that's really the case with most business owners. They just don't want to deal with it.
Totally, because a lot of the times it's sometimes just easier to continue on the path that you've been on. The pain isn't there. They're making enough money to get by, but they're not really thinking about like, what is the end goal here? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something really interesting. I listened to an interview that you did, and we had someone come and speak at a live event that we did a couple of weeks ago, that you said that when you first sit down with a business and you first start coaching them, something you ask them is like, what's the end game? Mm-hmm. Do you want to sell? Do you want to pass it down to your kids? Do you want to make a ton of money and retire? And I don't think enough contractors really think about like, what do I want at the end of this when they first start their business? And that can make the first couple of years, I feel like, very, very rocky with a lot of the home improvement companies that we speak to. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear from you, how can contractors really avoid going out of business in that, first year? The excitement is there, maybe in the first 2 or 3 months, they have like a great amount of clients that, are friends and family who are promoting them. And then, after 3 months, they're kind of like, what now? What are some really maybe like 1 to 3 steps that a contractor can take in that first year to make sure that they're going to be in business for the next 5?
Okay. So if everybody's in home services, which I think everybody on this podcast is, I tell every new business owners, find a neighborhood that's close to you, a neighborhood, probably not the most wealthiest neighborhood because everybody wants the most wealthiest neighborhood, but find a neighborhood where there is disposable income and drive your trucks around in that neighborhood every Saturday morning. And then do some marketing in that neighborhood, do some direct mail, do some EDDM, which is every door direct mail from the US Postal Service. And they'll break down the income by carrier route and everything for you. So you don't even have to do that. You can choose where you want to be, choose a subdivision, choose a neighborhood, and get known in that neighborhood, do the things in that neighborhood. And I promise you in a year, they won't have a problem, or you all won't have a problem. That's what I would do. That would be number one. Number two is make sure your pricing is right. And in the beginning, you're going to have to use a dartboard for your overhead costs and overhead cost per hour and the net profit per hour you want. However, make sure that your pricing is right. And if you think it should be $1, you probably should be $2, simply because most business owners starting out don't really understand what cost is and where all their overhead costs come from. And all their, they get the direct cost piece because they buy a part or they buy a piece of equipment and they quote unquote mark it up. Better off that you divide by the gross, 1 minus the gross margin and that type of thing, or use net profit per hour. However, number one, drive in a neighborhood. Number two, pricing right. Number three is making sure that you get testimonials. Every customer that you go to, you should get a testimonial for, even if it's your mother or your brother or your sister. They should be thrilled to give you a great testimonial.
I was about to say that should be the best testimonial you've ever had.
So, and get them. We all have mobile devices now, and you can put them on your website very easily. They don't have to say, "Hi, I'm John's mom," or anything like that. I was just really thrilled with the service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody's going to know that you're John's mom. It's just, get it on there, get it on your website, get the reviews, because people are looking at your website to make sure that they want to do business with you, and testimonials help. So those would be the three things that I would do.
No, I love that, especially the neighborhood piece. I feel like that's not talked about enough. Whereas contractors, especially, in a big city like Austin, they'll go and try to mark in every single neighborhood. They're kind of using the approach of like, let's get our name out to as many neighborhoods as possible. Whereas maybe if they just focused on one neighborhood, they build like a very, very strong client base, a very strong maintenance base. And as you grow the business, it actually helps, because when you're doing, your maintenance checks, whether you do it quarterly or semi-annually, you're all in the same neighborhood. You send your guy into one street and he can do, 6 houses all at once.
Sure,
which is cool to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is, I think there was a study done, and most people, it's within 5 miles of your office is where most of your customers are. So don't try and go out an hour. Don't try and go out. In the city of Atlanta, where I live, we actually do neighborhoods, because if you try to do the entire city of Atlanta, number one, you'd be traveling hours a day, which is nuts. And number two, the traffic will kill you. And you won't have enough billable hours a day to make it worth your while. So choose a neighborhood, choose, a small area that you really want to work in, you want to get known in, and go for it.
That's amazing. I would have just been like, here, everyone. Doggo's HVAC service, everyone I meet, I don't care where you live. So I remember a webinar that you did, I think about a year ago, on pricing, and there was this term that stuck out to me, like net profit per hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain why, like, the concept, number one, and then number two, why should businesses run on net profit per hour rather than, like you mentioned, markup or percentages,
Yeah. Okay, net profit per hour tells you for every billable hour how much actually drops to the bottom line. So if your net profit per hour is $5 an hour, for every billable hour, you earn $5. Not really where I'd like to be. You got to at least earn what you can earn in a fast food restaurant. Come on, let's be real. Otherwise, you go work for McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's or one of those. So that, and I can tell you exactly why. There's two contractors, and I will not name who the two contractors are. But when we started working together, each of them had a 10% net, which is really the way most people look at it. And one of them was earning about $10 net profit per hour, and the other one was earning 25. Which would you prefer? You want to be the 25 guy, or you want to be the $10 guy? It's really a no-brainer answer. I mean, obviously you want to be the 25, but they had exactly the same percentages. So percentages don't matter. You can't take a percentage to the bank. The only thing you can take to the bank is net profit. So what I do for pricing, which is very counterintuitive, is I flip the P&L upside down. Normally what we do is we start with sales, subtract out our costs, and then we get gross profit, subtract out our overhead costs, and we get net profit. I flip it. What net profit per hour do you want to earn? And then add your overhead cost per hour. That gives you your gross profit per hour. You add your direct costs, and then you get your selling price per hour. So for example, if a tech makes $25 an hour, the overhead cost is $30 an hour, and we want to earn, let's say, $10 net profit per hour. So we add $10 plus our $25 overhead cost per hour. So that gives us a $30 or $35 gross profit. And we add, what did I say, $30? Well, anyway, we add 10, 20, 35, we have $65 is our selling price. And that assumes that we have 100% billable hours, which we don't. So all of this is explained in a whole lot of detail in the pricing manual that you can use. The thing that's really, really, really important is that you know your overhead cost per hour. And smaller contractors have larger overhead costs per hour than larger ones do, simply because you don't have enough field people to spread the overhead around. So for example, if you're a one-guy shop and your overhead for the year is $100,000, yes, it's much smaller than the big guys. However, one person, you have to fund that entire 100,000. Let's assume you add one more person who's billable. And so at that point, your overhead doesn't double. Maybe it goes up 10,000 to cover, some of the truck costs, his cell phone, uniforms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we now have 110,000 in overhead divided by 2 now. So each person's responsible for $55,000 in overhead. We add a third person, we're now at 120,000 in overhead. So each person's now responsible for 40,000. And we can go on to the fourth person, the fifth person, the sixth person, all the way down the line, so that you can see more people that you add, the lower amount of overhead each person has to carry. And once you're at a company that's 20 or 30, each person carries this little bit piece of overhead. And so that's why they can sometimes charge less than you, because their overhead costs per hour is less than you, and that type of thing. But unless you know your overhead cost per hour and the net profit per hour you want to earn, then you really can't do your pricing properly. And Diego, before you ask me the next question, well, what net profit per hour should I be earning, right?
Well, I think for me, my question is, I guess, and this may be a dumb question because I'm not a contractor that sends an invoice every day, but I mean, where do you tuck in that over? Is it in the labor cost, or is it like in, you know, I don't know, like where do you tuck that in? Like, how do I make that? I guess for me, my fear is how do I make that palatable to a customer when they see the line item or when they see, whatever the price is.
Yeah, first of all, there's no line items. You just do it. You have a price to the customer, and it could be using flat rate pricing, or if you're, replacing something or doing a project, there's a project price. So the overhead, again, all we're going to do is we're going to flip the P&L backwards. What net profit do we want? We add the overhead that we want, and then we add our direct costs, and that's the price to the customer. The key is making sure that you are providing value to the customer. In some things, the customer may be shocked because they're going to be spending a couple $100s. And then if you don't make it to the point where the customer is happy spending a couple $100s, there's buyer's remorse, bad reviews, and all the other fun stuff that goes along with it. So you have to make it so the customer feels valued. You educate the customer about what you did, and so that they, maybe not so happily, but they're understanding why they're spending X number of dollars to do this.
Yeah,
Totally.
I last week I spent $4,500 on trees, and I was just like, I can't believe I'm spending this much money on cutting down some trees and trimming some branches off. But I was happy to, I was like so happy to do it. And it was like, they did a wonderful job. They, they cleaned after themselves. It was like, it was very, my wife was like, they were so clean and professional. I was like, honestly, I don't mind spending $4,500 on trees if, my backyard's going to look a little better and, oh no, a lot better. And like it was just kind of a smooth process. So I get that. And I didn't ask like, can I see your labor costs? It
Yeah,
was just I just paid it.
exactly. Yeah. Sarah?
It makes you realize that the value proposition goes beyond just the price. And I think that's something I hear contractors all the time. They're like, oh, we're always getting beaten out on price. And it's like, yes, you might be getting beaten out on price, but you might also be getting beat out on the fact that your customer experience isn't as good as someone else who's charging
Well, I mean,
more.
I will say, sorry, this is a lot of personal experience, but I had another quote from a guy who, I knew from a friend, and he was like, "Oh, I'll do it for like 3,500." But I was like, I don't know if this guy's insured. I don't know if this guy's, gonna like be here on time. Like, there's all of these question marks, and I did end up going with a more established company, even though it was more expensive, because I knew that they would get the job done in a day. Like they have the insurance, they have all of this stuff that comes with it. So there is, like you said, that value, that peace of mind that does come along with presenting yourself like more professionally, and also even with that price tag. It's like, oh, okay, I know I'm paying for something, this better experience.
Yeah, and the thing that you've got to make sure is when you're doing it, and let's, the guy who was at $4,500, I bet he didn't apologize for the $4,500 price either, right?
No, he was like, this is what it is. We're gonna do this tree, this tree, this tree, this tree. Just
Yeah.
sign.
And you were happy to do it simply because he didn't go, oh my gosh, it's $4,500 in his mind, and you would have picked up on that. If your price is $4,500, your price is $4,500, you're worth $4,500, sign here. And 80% of the population, when they are educated, they will never default to price. They'll default to value and understanding the differences between price. Now, there's still 20% of the population who, they do everything on price, the cheapest price. If somebody's $2 less than you were, they're going to go for it. That's not who you want as customers. You want the other 80%.
No, that makes total sense. And I think like the idea of confidence when you're presenting price is almost as important as what you're pricing, because you're so right. If someone gives you a price and they're like shaking and they're apologizing, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, it's so expensive, or like making apologies, it devalues the process so much. No, I love that. And then something when we were, looking at kind of a lot of the content that you've been writing recently is we have this idea of profit, this idea of net profit per hour, but also the importance of building wealth as a small business. And it'd be really helpful if you could explain to our home improvement contractors, what is actually the difference between profit and wealth, and why are both important to be building as you think about the growth of your business?
All right, you can't have business wealth without profit. All right, so that's number one. All right, profit basically is revenues minus expenses. You have a profit if your revenue was higher than expenses, and you have a loss when you have expenses higher than revenues. That's basically a P&L. It doesn't tell you how much profit or how much money you have in the bank or anything from that perspective. P&L just is a P&L. Wealth is the ability to sleep well at night. So, for example, one of the things that I always talk about is building a savings account. If you take 1%, just 1% of every dollar that comes in the door, and just put it in a savings account and don't touch it, you will be building wealth. Because, think about COVID. Think about how many restaurants who were very, very profitable still went out of business because they didn't have the client base or the customer base to be able to support them when they couldn't go to the restaurant anymore. If you had a really good customer base, you could do, send out meals. They could come pick up meals. I mean, there's lots of things that many restaurants did to survive. But if they were only profit and they hadn't built any cash flow or any cash savings, that's the wealth piece. That's, cash and assets are the first part of wealth. The second part is off the balance sheet, but it's actually your customer base. How loyal your customers. Sarah, you mentioned recurring revenue and maintenance agreements. That is key and critical to building wealth. because your loyal customers will support you in thick and thin. The more loyal customers you have, the more who are in your referral programs and your maintenance programs, however you define a recurring revenue program, the more that they will refer, they will listen, they will, take your advice a lot of times. So the customer base is part of building wealth, and cash is part of building wealth. You need liquid wealth.
Yeah, I mean, we try to run that like way as a household, like that budget. There was like that line item, and I think if people, I don't know if this is good advice or not, but think about it kind of as a household. Like, I mean, are you saving money for your home, like for your family? And you should probably be doing the same for your business. Um, I remember I was at another company at the beginning of COVID, and there was this really, really deep sense of reassurance because the company was like, if all things go bad, we have enough cash in the bank for 9 months. And that was really like, that is like something that you rarely heard of, I think personally, during that time at the beginning of COVID, and that was really reassuring. It's like they had really thought about it, and they had a ton of runway. Um,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think,
I can't tell you how many of my clients called me on the phone at the beginning of COVID and said, thank you, thank you, thank you for making me put money away. Whatever
yeah,
happens, I have money to survive. It was, and that's the perfect reason. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
no, 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 no. That's yeah. I mean, it's because like if you have employees, your family, like literally, there's so many people that rely, on the strength of the business, and I know it's a lot of pressure, but also at the same time, it's almost. I feel like it would be incredibly gratifying to be like, I planned, I did this, and now like we're in a good spot, and we could attack this problem head on. COVID's quote unquote over, or we're
It's
heading
never going
we're
to be
heading out
over.
of it. I know it's, but it's like the flu; it'll always be around.
Yeah.
Um, but the people who have weathered the storm made smart business decisions like that, and I think whatever happens with the economy in the next 5 years or 10 years, whatever. Like it's about being ready for whatever downturns or upturns or whatever that come your way. So I think that's wonderful advice.
Do you want to know
There's
my
some
formula for cash?
Yeah, I
All
need that.
right.
Hold on, let me write that down for myself.
Yeah, I was like, I'm about to get a pen and paper for myself personally.
All right, here's my rule for enough cash savings. All right, number one, take your busiest month. All right, and so, if you're a heating and air contractor and you're in Florida, it's probably July. All right, so you want to look at your payroll for your busiest month and your overhead for your busiest month. So you take your payroll, total payroll, including what you pay yourself, multiply by 3, and take your total overhead and multiply it by 6. Add the two together, and that's the minimum savings you should have. Now, you can always have more, but that's probably the minimum savings to sleep well at night.
Brilliant. I'm writing that down. I need, yeah, I need more money sense. I'm the guy there's a tweet floating around now that's like, do you actually like, did you budget in your 20s, or did everybody just start in their 30s? Because in their 20s, I feel like nobody budgets. It's just kind of like whatever. And then
Yeah.
in my 30s, I've actually finally started doing it, which is, I'm telling on myself a little bit. But I mean, yeah, it's so crucial. Okay, I have one more question. Um, I've talked about my past a lot today, but I was a Better Business Bureau for a while, and I wrote a lot about like business, like scams and things and traps and things that you can like find yourself in if you don't pay attention. And I think where this is leading me is like why, when somebody starts their business and they're starting to grow, one of the first things that they do is they hire like a bookkeeper or an accountant or someone to like keep the books, right? Because we had a live event a couple weeks ago, and somebody was like, I'm really great at putting roofs on, but I'm not so great at the numbers. But there is also that sense of like, well, if I just give it to someone, they know what they're doing, right? Like I don't have to keep an eye on it.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing.
No, but I mean that's the sense, right? Because like even like I did my taxes this month, and I was just like I just gave it to a guy, and I was like, here you go, guy. Manuel, luckily, really great guy, but it could have gone poorly for us, right? Like
Yeah.
if it wasn't the right person or the right firm.
Yeah.
So I guess number one, the first question is like, how important is it to be able to read financial statements? What are some things that people can do to kind of learn that aspect of the business? But also, what are some things they need to look out for when working with an accountant or a bookkeeper? Like, what are some red flags? Like, oh God, I need to look into this,
All right. Number one is you can delegate the day-to-day bookkeeping. You can't abdicate, i.e., forget about the financial review and looking at your financial statements. Okay. I've written 2 books, and the third book's going to be out next year. The Courage to Be Profitable is a really easy book to read. It's in English. It explains accounting. It explains accounting terms, what a P&L is and what a balance sheet is, without accounting babble. It's really easy to read. Profit or Wealth talks about the rules related to balance sheets and P&Ls. And next year, 101 Dumb Financial Mistakes is coming out. So, those 3 things. It will take you less than a half an hour a month to actually start understanding and looking at the financial statements. Never, 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 never. And I do very few nevers ever trust your bookkeeper totally, except unless it's your wife. Okay. I've had mothers steal, I've had brothers steal, I've had sisters, so just be careful with that. Never give your bookkeeper a check signing authority, because it's really hard if that person does embezzle. And those would be the first 2 things that I would say. And always remember that the job of a good embezzler is to become the trusted bookkeeper. Ingratiate him or herself in your business, become friends, et cetera, et cetera. And then one day they're gone with hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just be careful from that perspective. Always. I literally just had a situation. I have a bookkeeping test, and I'm happy it's done by the American Institute of Certified Bookkeepers. I think it's AICB. And if you can't pass that test, you cannot work at a company that I work with, or, from that perspective. And so we had somebody pass the test. They came in, and I went down there just to make sure and help clean up the books and everything like that. And she was really, really strong and wanted control. And I'm like, told the owner she cannot have control. This is what she is, da 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 da. And I didn't get a couple of things, it was a couple of weeks later, about a month later. And I said, I haven't gotten this. And he said, well, she vanished. I haven't seen her since, Monday. And if a bookkeeper who is an embezzler can't find a way to steal, they evaporate. So you can have really, really, really good bookkeepers who just evaporate in a month. And I can't prove that she was, but that's a very big symptom of somebody who is a great bookkeeper who's also an embezzler. All
right.
right.
Because they're like looking for a way in. And if they've tried every single way, it's so important to think about the fact that like you can't just give away that piece of your business, because it's like you want to focus on the work, you want to focus on the production side of the house, because like a lot of the times, the owners that we speak with, that's what they're most comfortable with. A lot of the times they've worked on a crew for many years, and, that's where their comfort lies. But I think it's such a good point that it doesn't take that much time, and you don't have to worry about getting your bachelor's in accounting to still really own and oversee the financial parts of your business.
I would prefer they don't have a bachelor's in accounting, to be perfectly frank. But you do best learn how to read the financial statements, because your bachelor's in accounting will not teach you how to read a financial statement.
Which is crazy to think about. No,
I look at it this way. Everybody who's listening right now has done something really hard when they started their business. So if we take, and I'm going to take the HVAC perspective because that's what came to my head, they looked at a wiring diagram the first time and it looked like Greek. And you're going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. How do I read this? How do I use this, et cetera? But it was part of what you did. So you took the time to learn it. And all of a sudden, within a couple months or a couple weeks, they're easy. Well, it's the same with financials. The first time you look at it, it is going to look like Greek. I don't know what a balance sheet is. I don't know what I think my P&L tells me whether I'm making money or not. And quite frankly, it really doesn't. Your balance sheet tells you true profitability, but that's for another day. Excuse me. So you just, spend 30 minutes a month. That's all I'm asking you. We all waste 30 minutes a month. And just start looking at it and look at your P&Ls and look at your balance sheets and see whether they make sense. And if they don't, start asking questions and never accept excuses from your bookkeeper. So.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ruth. It was so great having you on. There's so many just tidbits of information that whether you're in the roofing space, HVAC, you're a general contractor, or you're like me, just always trying to get better with money and understand how to save more. This has been incredibly valuable. So thank you for coming on. And to learn more about Ruth and how she can help your business through coaching or many of her incredible guides, feel free to visit her website, which is ruthkinghvac.com. And Ruth, any other sign-offs to our home improvement contractors?
Unless you're in pain, sick with what's going on, you're not going to change. So just, if you want to complain about where you are, that's fine. Just realize you're not going to change. But if you're ready to change, there's so many people who can help you. Hearth can help you. I can help you. Other coaches can help you. Just choose one and get started.
Absolutely. Love that. Well, thank you again, Ruth, for coming on. Look forward to speaking with you in the future. And thanks.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Dago. Appreciate it.